Welcome to the Explainer. You know, we've all been through it. All those years sitting in a classroom, learning all the things we were told were important. But have you ever really stopped and asked, why? Why those things? Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the hidden blueprint of our education, the curriculum. Seriously, think back for a second. Why did you have to learn geometry or read that specific book in English class? Why learn the history of one place but not another? I mean, it can feel like a totally random bunch of subjects, right? But what if it wasn't? What if it was all part of a very carefully designed plan?
Because that's what a curriculum really is. It's not just a syllabus or a list of topics. It's a blueprint. It's like an architectural drawing for the society of the future. And the main building material? Well, that's the student. Every single subject, every textbook, every lesson is a deliberate choice, all aimed at building a very specific kind of person.
And that, of course, raises the really big questions. Who gets to be the architect here? Is the blueprint designed to create, say, a well-rounded individual, a patriotic citizen, or is it for something else entirely? As we're about to find out, there are some powerful competing interests all fighting for control of that drafting table.
So let's start with one of the most powerful forces shaping education today, the global economy. We'll call this the global economy blueprint. And it's all about designing the perfect worker for what the World Economic Forum has dubbed Education 4.0.
So what does this ideal worker actually look like? Well, according to the WEF, they need to be a global citizen. They have to be innovative, tech-savvy, and a great collaborator. So the curriculum gets redesigned to build these traits using things like personalized learning and group problem solving. And this isn't just some theory. This is the actual model behind huge, influential programs like the International Baccalaureate. The goal is crystal clear: produce a graduate who can slot right into a multinational company.
Now, this intense focus on global skills has led to this really fascinating idea called corporate multiculturalism. And as researcher Julia Resnick points out, this isn't about social justice, not in the way we usually think about it. Nope. This is about strategically using diversity as a business asset. It's multiculturalism for the marketplace.
Resnick breaks it all down into 3 pillars. First, you've got the cognitive pillar. Basically, training students to see problems from lots of different angles, which for a company is a goldmine for innovation. Second, the emotional pillar, building open-mindedness and adaptability, which you absolutely need to handle unpredictable global markets. And third, the social communicative pillar, teaching people how to collaborate and communicate with folks from totally different backgrounds. You see? These aren't just vague life skills. They are, very specifically, the core job requirements for a manager at a global corporation.
Okay, this all sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I mean, who wouldn't want adaptable, innovative kids? But let's pause for a second and put on our critical thinking hats. Who really benefits from this specific blueprint? And maybe more importantly, who gets left behind? This quote just gets right to the heart of the critique. It says the curriculum isn't just some neutral tool for learning. It can act like a machine that takes existing social power, things like wealth, family connections, and turns it into academic success, which in turn just keeps the whole social structure exactly as it is. And here's the key argument. Critics say these global curricula can become a kind of cultural capital. They basically act like a high-end brand that wealthy families can use to give their kids a leg up in the race for the best universities and jobs. In other words, they risk becoming a tool for social mobility, but only for the people who could already afford to play the game in the first place. And wow, does this slide illustrate the point? A 2019 analysis of Cambridge literature syllabi found a really staggering imbalance. Over 75% of the authors were from Europe and North America. The entire global south, that's Asia, Africa, and Latin America, made up less than a quarter of the list. And authors from the Middle East and North Africa, 0. A big, fat 0. Critics argue this isn't just some simple oversight, it's the continuation of a colonial legacy, where a European worldview is passed off as the universal standard for everyone. So, all this criticism of the existing blueprints brings up a really fundamental question. If you can design a curriculum for the economy, what would it look like to design one purely for the child? And that brings us to a really famous alternative, the Montessori method. And the difference in philosophy here is just stark. Conventional education, for the most part, is focused on academic scores, how well you do in math, science, reading, and so on.
But Montessori's main goal is the child's holistic development, their intellectual, physical, emotional, and social growth. It's a completely different definition of what success in school even means.
So how does it do this? Well, a lot of the genius is in the tools, the materials themselves. Montessori materials are ingeniously designed to isolate just one concept at a time, so a child's focus is never divided. They help guide learning from concrete, hands-on things towards big, abstract ideas. And brilliantly, each material has a built-in control of error, so a child can actually discover and correct their own mistakes, all on their own. But the method is just as critical as the materials. The classroom is this prepared environment where kids actually choose their own activities. They get this long, uninterrupted 3-hour work period, which allows for really deep concentration. You have mixed age groups, so older kids naturally end up teaching the younger ones. And get this, there are no grades or gold stars. The entire focus is on building a genuine, intrinsic love of learning.
Now, a child-centered approach sounds amazing, but it definitely raises the big question: does it work? I mean, if we shift the goal away from pure academics, what does the evidence actually show? Let's take a look at the data and see the real-world outcomes of this kind of blueprint. Does this different approach lead to better results, worse results, or just different results? Well, lucky for us, a major systematic review from 2023 that looked at dozens of studies gives us some surprisingly clear answers. Okay, first up, let's look at the academics, the main goal of conventional school. The review found that, on average, Montessori students actually outperformed their peers in traditional schools in both math and language. So even when you measure it against the old school goals, this child-focused blueprint shows a really positive effect. But what about all those non-academic skills? Well, this is where the results are even more striking. Montessori students showed stronger social skills and, get this, significantly higher levels of executive function. That's the brain's ability to manage things like attention, memory, and self-control. We're talking about a crucial set of skills for success in life, not just in school. And if we boil down all of that academic data into one single powerful number, this is what we get: an overall effect size of positive 0.24. Now, in the world of educational research, that is a clear, significant, positive impact. The data seems to show that designing a blueprint for the child doesn't hurt academics. In fact, it looks like it pays dividends. Which brings us right back around to where we started. We've looked at different blueprints with wildly different goals and very different outcomes. And it forces us to ask, which of these should we be using to design our future? We've seen how these blueprints can serve different masters. Now, a lot of historical curricula were designed for the nation, to build a single unified civic identity. But today, we focused on two of the big ones competing right now: one blueprint for the global corporation and one for the child. And this right here is the most important takeaway from all of this. No curriculum is neutral. Every single decision about what's taught, how it's taught, and why it's taught is a value judgment. It's a conscious choice about the skills we prioritize, the knowledge we think is important, and ultimately, the kind of society we actually want to build. Which leaves us with one final question for you to think about. If you were the architect, pen in hand, designing the blueprint for the next generation, what would be its ultimate goal? What kind of person and what kind of world would your blueprint be designed to build?